Hello folks, welcome to Darktable Landscapes. We're going to be processing this shot from Northumberland today, and to celebrate also hitting 1,000 subscribers recently, I will also be processing this shot of an otter. So if you'd like to stick around and see a non-landscape shot being processed, please do. Otherwise we will get cracking on this shot. Okay, so let's get going with some basic adjustments. Lens correction first of all. Put that on, denoise. Shouldn't be too much. We're at ISO 200, shot on a tripod. And let's do a little bit of cropping and straightening. So the first thing we'll do is straighten. So we can just right click and hold anywhere in the image and draw a line along a hopefully straight line. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to crop off the top a little bit, I think, because there's not much going on here. I'll just kind of bring our focus in. That's pretty good. And now we'll just do a general overall exposure bump. Let's see. Don't want to go too far. I may just do a little bit of sigmoid skewing as well. So here's our tone mapper. I'll raise our target black, give it a bit more contrast. And I want to reduce the exposure back again in the sky here. So for that, I will use another instance of exposure. Right click to make a new one. And let's just drop it until we get the sky how we want it first of all. We don't want too much of a stark difference between the foreground and the sky, otherwise it'll look artificial. So let's go about 0.5 for now. And now let's mask it off so we're not doing anything with the rest of the image. So let's go drawn parametric. Pop on our mask preview. So first thing we'll do is just exclude darker parts. So we'll drag that up. We do want the reflection of the sky to be affected a certain amount. So that's fine. Now, as you can see, we're getting the sunlit portion of this rock face here. This was a quarry that the Romans took stone for Hadrian's Wall to build. So you can see a bit of the wall along here. And this kind of cliff face was left. And you can see now that we're selecting it still, it's kind of looking a bit weird and flat and muddy. So we need to exclude that. So my first port of call would probably be the saturation, as the sunlight has made this area very saturated. So if I click on the saturation slider and press C, now you can see that it's a pretty good selection, but it's also kind of comparable to the saturation of the upper part of the sky. So we're looking to separate it from the sky, so that's actually not a good choice for a mask. So the other obvious difference is the color. So this is blue and this is orange. So let's see if we can do it by selecting the orange colors. I'm not sure Darktable's going crazy there with my previews. So let's see. We'll go here. And we'll click in here. Turn that off again. So now it's selecting a narrow band of color, but this is the wrong way around. We want to kind of unselect this area. Now it's only just selecting it, so we'll flip this. There we go. So now we're using the gray value here to just select the brighter parts of the image, and then we're using a kind of a negative hue to unselect the orange parts of the image, which in this case is the cliff face in this hillside. And now a final problem is we're also affecting this meadow sweet, these white flowers in the foreground here. We don't want to do that. We want to exclude that. So for that, we'll use a simple gradient. So we'll just say only apply our mask above this gradient line here. So we've combined kind of three separate masks there. The brightness values, the saturation of the oranges, and a gradient to just give a clear demarcation as to where the mask should be applied. So the final thing we just need to do is add a bit of feathering, just to soften off the effect. Let's say 50 for argument's sake. We'll turn off our preview. And now let's just find our effect. So if we, as I say, if we drop that too much, you can see that it begins to look really artificial. That's obvious and terrible. So we want to just adjust it enough to get the effect we want without looking fake. Well, I would say that's probably about right. See, the sky is very washed out there, but now we've brought back some of the contrast and the colour. Now I think we probably do want to just boost the exposure maybe in the foreground. So I'm going to control click and name this sky, so we know that's the sky exposure module. And then I'll right click on that button to make another new instance of exposure. So we've got 3 now, and we'll just call this foreground. And let's do another drawn mask and another gradient. And this time we'll flip it around and give it a bit of a fade off. So shift and roll the mouse wheel while hovering over this part of the gradient control. And now we'll just give a little boost to that part, I think. Maybe bring that in a little bit more. That's good. Now we'll do just some general adjustments with color balance RGB, general vibrance boost, touch more contrasts. Let's see, yeah, some saturation, and let's see, boost the shadows a touch, drop the mids. Highlights are pretty good. Actually, that's maybe too much in the shadows. We're starting to look a bit washed out. Okay, now we'll add some clarity. So we'll go to the contrast equalizer, add on, and we'll roll our mouse wheel until the circle's nice and big off the edges of the graph, and then we'll just drag up slightly just to boost clarity. It's pretty good. And it's maybe a touch too much. Let's just drag it back a touch. There we go. Okay, let's look at sharpening. I've been playing around with the diffusion sharpen module presets, and I found that I quite like the sharpen demosaicing preset in combination with the normal lens deblur preset. So if I zoom in here on the image, this is now I think 100%. Yeah. So this is 100%. You can see it's slightly kind of muddy. My camera, this particular camera is the Fuji X-T20. That doesn't have an anti-aliasing filter on the sensor. So I'm going to use the Sharpen Demosaicing No AA filter preset. And you can see straight away that makes quite a significant difference in the level of detail that it's pulling out of this rock face. And I would think that's actually more of a difference than the lens deblur makes. So I've been toying around, and I found a pretty good result is to use one instance of diffusion sharpen for this No AA filter demosaicing sharpening, and then use another. So I'm going to right click here and then use the lens deblur soft just to counteract any softness from the lens itself not being the world's best lens, although all lenses will have some softness. Now, because we're kind of combining 2 sharpening layers, if you like, in one, it tends to look a little bit over sharpened as is. So I found if you just bump down, say, to 4 iterations, so this is the number of times the module is looping through the data and applying sharpening to it. If you reduce the iteration slightly, it avoids that very kind of overcooked, over sharpened look. So together, it makes for a much cleaner result than just using one or the other on its own. So you can see this very kind of soft, muddy look here. And then the No AA filter sharpening really makes a difference. Your camera may have an anti-aliasing filter, in which case try the relevant preset. Mine doesn't have one. I think most don't these days. So use the one that's appropriate for your camera. A quick Google should tell you one or the other. So that's sharpening, and now let's do some vignetting. So another exposure. So that's 4 total. I think that may be a record for me. We'll do a drawn mask. So an oval like this is perfect. Let's widen it a little bit. And then at the moment, we're affecting everything inside the oval. So we'll click here and we'll flip it. And now it's affecting only the outside. And then we'll drop our exposure just a touch. Add some depth. Feather it a little just for a really nice soft effect so we can't see it's obviously a vignette. Go. I'll call this vignette. So here's our before and after. We've straightened it up, we've tweaked the exposure, fixed the sky somewhat, and sharpened it significantly. So there's our finished shot with a little bit of a frame added for a finishing touch. And as I said at the beginning of the video, we'll go on now to do a little processing on an otter, some nature rather than landscape. If you'd like to join me there, feel free. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you on the next one. Okay, so here's our 1,000 subscriber bonus otter. He was drying himself off on the grass as he just come out of a loch. And in this shot, I'm just going to enhance the otter himself, de-emphasize the grass and emphasize the otter. We'll add texture, we'll add some color, and make use of Darktable's masking as ever to do that. So let's get going. First thing we'll do is exposure, I think. A little bit low. Quite a range, obviously, of light here. He's kind of in deep shadow where he's in the grass, but his fur is catching this sunlight, so we need to deal with that. Let's do lens correction. And we may as well denoise. I think we're at maybe at 500 ISO, so slightly noisy. Even though there's plenty of light around, it's not high ISOs that make for noise, it's lack of light. Okay, let's see. Let's go for a color equalizer, I think. And yeah, we'll grab these greens. Let's go for a slight yellow. Shift. Oh, sorry, that's saturation. Hue, there we go. So if we go down, we're going to shift that towards orange and red. If you really want to go crazy, which we rarely do. Let's shift slightly towards that, and then we'll drop the saturation as well. And we'll also boost saturation in the otter himself. So if I click Control and on this eyedropper here, that gives me a box I can draw, and that provides a range of tones, or range of hues I should say, that will affect the otter. So you can see we're in the kind of the red-brown end of things. So let's boost the saturation in him, enhance that kind of red-brown otter fur. Okay, and we should have a look at sigmoid before we go on. So let's go for lift the blacks a little bit, go for a slightly filmy look, I suppose. Maybe up contrast, skew slightly. Contrast a bit too much already. Okay, let's go for color balance RGB, and we'll just sort out these highlights and things, I think. So general vibrance boost as always. Leave contrast as it is, it's fine for now. Let's drop the highlights a touch. We still want to, we've got some nice kind of what they call rim light in portrait photography. We want to keep that, but we don't want to really kind of blow them out too much. We'll just give it a slight drop. Don't want to make it look too flat. That three-dimensionality going. There we go. Maybe a slight touch of blue in the shadows. Again for that filmy look, or maybe even a little kind of slight blue teal kind of look. Yeah, that's okay to me. So now let's really enhance this furry texture. So we'll go for the contrast equalizer. There we go. And we will lift up this end and really lift up this end, the fine end. Now we don't want to boost the texture in the grass. We're not interested in the grass, we're interested in the otter in this shot. So we'll mask off the otter. So let's just use a parametric mask. I think we don't need to draw much for this one. Let's have a look at our mask. So from pressing C while we hover over the slider here, we can see there's not much separation there between the otter and the background. Let's have a look at saturation. Not really, although the otter is slightly less saturated. I think the most stark difference is obviously in the hues. So we will click this little eyedropper here with the plus, which again lets us draw an area, and we'll see what Darktable gives us. So we'll turn on the mask preview. That's a little bit too broad. Obviously we're not selecting just the otter, we're selecting pretty much everything. We're still selecting yellows and greens here, which is the grass. So Let's adjust. Now we're getting somewhere. We're just pull back even more of the otter this way, I think. So really, we're essentially selecting everything but the greens and yellows here on this slider. Now we're starting to select the grass again, so we'd be careful just to pull that back. Doesn't matter if a little bit of texture creeps into the grass, but we're just mainly focusing. So now we can just increase the feathering radius a fair amount and the blurring radius, which should kind of help us out a fair bit. There we go, that's pretty good. We are selecting some of the browner bits of the grass, but that's fine. It's mostly in the outer focus areas anyway. So let's pop that off. And then we can see the effect. Really enhancing the texture in the fur there. It's grand. Okay, whenever we're shooting anything that has eyes, our eyes are naturally drawn to the eye. So let's make sure that we can see that properly. It's a little lost in shadow here. So let's go for another instance of color balance RGB. I don't want to just boost exposure because then it'll look kind of weirdly light in that area. What I want to do is grab a quick drawn mask, just a little circle. That's perfect, in fact. Pop it over the eye, plenty of feathering, and we'll just drag up the shadows. And that will give you a more natural result than boosting exposure on its own. You can really push the highlights if you want to. If there's a strong highlight in the eye, there isn't particularly here, it's more on the fur. I'm not going to push it too much in terms of highlights. But we'll just pulled out the eye a little bit more. There we go. For that eye. And now there's not much more left to do other than a good old-fashioned vignette. So we'll grab another exposure instance. We'll use another drawn mask. Let's go like that and flip it round using again the polarity button. And then we'll drop exposure outside the otter. Give it some feathering. Nice smooth result. There we go. And now we'll do sharpening. So diffuse and sharpen again. I'm going to use the same technique as I did for the landscape shot in the first half. So sharpen demosaicing, no AA filter. Just do the whole image with that. So we'll just grab a new instance and we will go for lens deburr soft. And then we will use the mask that we use for exposure for the vignette. So there we go, use the same shape as vignette, but it won't have copied over the polarity of the mask. So it's going to be selecting inside. That's what we want. That's fine. We want to sharpen the otter and not the grass. And that is about it. Okay, so here's our before and after. Lifted the exposure, enhanced the detail, really focused attention on the otter rather than anything else. Pulled out detail in the eye. Generally made for a nicer image, I think. Okay, there's our finished otter. Hope you like this one as well. It's been a month since I started the channel, so hitting 1,000 subscribers is a big surprise to me. But thank you to everyone who's supported me, given tips and general encouragement. Obviously, Darktable in conjunction with landscape and nature photography is something that people like to see, so I will keep making them as long as people keep wanting them. Again, thank you for your support. If you haven't subscribed and liked already, please do, and I will catch you on the next one.